Hey everyone, Chuck here with Frank Bacon Machinery. I'm going to show you another machine that we recently just finished up for specifically ASTM D4595 and 6637. This machine would be set up for either one of those specific tests. A little bit more custom than a lot of machines that we put out. This had to get roller grips for gripping pretty tough samples. Here's the Geogrids specimens that we'll be running right now. This ASTM is typically going to call for a sample being pulled at 10% of its gauge length. Most of the time it's going to be 4-inch gauge length, so we run at 0.4 inches a minute until failure. For both of those ASTMs, most of the time you're going to be taking down elongation, modulus, max load. Our customers doing a little bit more than that with their samples. There's going to be variance in that depending on what version of that ASTM you're doing. So for these samples, we actually had to do a little bit of trial and error. We originally started with some Geotextile pneumatic grips that were not able to hold these samples until failure. All the break was occurring within the grip faces. For these ASTMs, it's vital that the failure occurs within the gauge length. So we actually had to move on to some roller grips that were better equipped to grip these specific samples. So for loading these, the sample is going to come around the bottom drum, around the larger top drum here, and go into these faces, which you'll then fasten down using those bolts. It just allows for more surface area for that sample to be gripped and held better, so there's not slippage, nor is it going to break around the drum itself. So another important aspect of this test, as I mentioned earlier, is getting the sample to break within the gauge length. For some samples, not all, depending on, again, which ASTM you're running, how closely you're looking to follow it, you might have to modify your sample to get the grip properly. For these ones, we actually need to cut the outer ribs to make sure that that break occurs within our gauge length. And for our stress and elongation measurements, we have a custom extensometer that we're going to clip on to the sample within that gauge length. Okay. So now that's on. Remove our pin. We should be good to run a test. Now we're not following this to a T, either of these ASTMs. I'm going to speed this up a little bit just to try and get it to break a little bit faster for video purposes. So that is starting to fail a little bit. It's going to take quite a while for it to fail completely across. drum, like I said, some wax paper or some kind of lubricant around those drums. Hopefully help this customer get rid of that. I'm going to pause it at this point and remove our extensometer just because it is the customer's. I don't want to see it get damaged here. This brake should be a little bit more explosive than I and that there would be pretty much considered a failure. So that did break for the most part within our gauge length. If it was not to break within that gauge length, it wouldn't be an acceptable test. And again, that's what we ran into a little bit with having to switch grips up. Some of this is pretty tough to test, very tough to grip. But we were able to find these ones custom for this specific ASTM. So if you're a manufacturer in geotextiles, geosynthetics, any kind of textile manufacturer, we're certainly happy to help you. We can build custom machines like this. We can do testing for you in-house. Give us a call anytime to discuss.